Hello, hello, hello. A very warm welcome to everybody who joins us on Africa Rise with Susan West. It is another beautiful Sunday, and I have been counting down to seeing you again. In our usual manner, of course, I would love for you to remember to share this broadcast, invite your friends, create watch parties. And if you haven't liked and followed us on Facebook, please do so. It is underscore Susan West. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, it is also underscore Susan West. Please like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media platforms. Okay, so today we will be having guests from South Africa, and I am super excited. One of the reasons I'm really relaxed about my guest today from South Africa is because I am hopeful that we're not going to have to deal with the network issues that we do deal with when we have guests from my beloved country, Nigeria. Yes, so in a minute I will be bringing on our guests. We have Nkosazana Ndlovu, and then we have Dr.Charles Sinkala. They're all from South Africa. And so please remember, as you join this broadcast, to share the broadcast, create watch parties, invite your friends, like and follow us, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Welcome, early bird Rahina Bello. I can see you. Greetings, she says. Welcome. So also remember to send in your comments, your questions, if you have any contributions, basically. So whatever the discussion is about, whatever you have as your comment, type it in, and I will do well to read out as many comments as I see come in. And if you have any questions for our guests, do not hesitate to ask those questions. All right. In the meantime, I'm going to bring in Nkosazana Ndlovu. I love her name, and I'm not having a problem pronouncing the name today. Hello. Welcome to Africa Rise, dear sister. How are you?
I'm well, Susan, and you? How are you? And good evening to all the viewers. I'm assuming it's evening. It's evening in my country, South Africa. So good evening to everybody in the diaspora. Good evening to the entire African continent, and good evening to people in my country as well.
Yes, it is. Good evening here in London as well. Absolutely fantastic. I haven't seen our other guest come on. When he does come on, I will bring him on screen. But in earnest, we want to start this discussion today, which is the ineffective leadership of the African Union. And 2020 is supposed to be the year of silencing the guns on the African continent. How is that going to be possible without equity and justice? Because there are countries on the African continent that is blatantly disregarding laws and constitutional orders and stuff. And so a few countries are on the brink. It doesn't take a very old person to be wise enough to see that it is on the brink of getting to that point, which we don't want to see. So first of all, let's start with the ineffective leadership of the African Union. As you know, your president, Ramaphosa, is the chairman of the AU, and then we have Mr. Faki Mahatma Musa Faki, who is the chairman of the AUC, which is the African Union Commission. And it blows my mind, it perplexes me to see that even though Mr. Faki have been so ineffective and does not seem to have does not have Africa at heart in his decision making, and obviously is not sophisticated enough to lead that position, that he wants to come unopposed, and your president does seem to be, having a very strong relationship with him, and the voices on the continent is calling that position should be open for others to come in and also, run against him. So let's just take it from there. Why are we having a situation like this in 2020 for Africans in the diaspora and on the continent? We know that if the African Union is as relevant as it should be, that if it is the institution that if it becomes the institution that it should be, that some of the issues we have on the African continent can be curbed with the influence of the African Union.
Thank you very much for your question, Susan. It's quite a difficult one to answer as a civilian myself, but however, I will try my best to actually answer it as best as I can. Maybe let me just start first without maybe answering the question directly regarding the two leaders, my president, who's the chairman of the African Union, as well as the president of the African Union Commission, Mr. Faki. Let me maybe say, for any governance to work, it needs to be based on three pillars, and that is the constitutionalism, the rule of law, and the independence of or separation of powers between your executive authority, which is your government, the parliament of that state, which is a representation of the different constituencies represented by different political parties in those parliaments, as well as the judiciary. So, for any effective governance to function and to be healthy in a democracy, it has to be premised on the rule of law, on a strong constitution, and the separation of powers that are independent of each other and yet complement each other in terms of functioning. And so you find that sometimes in Africa, the challenge that we have is that we don't have these components working well, where you may find that we may have the constitution there, but it may have a lot of gaps in terms of the law and the rule of law, etc. And at the same time, there is no independence in terms of the separation of powers, where the parliament, the judiciary, as well as the executive authority are not supposed to interfere with each other, though they're supposed to be checking on each other and ensuring that on all sides they're actually doing what they ought to do. So the challenge that I find is that where you have these three pillars not operating as they should, it then leaves a gap. And when there is that gap, it has a direct impact then on governance, and that has a direct consequence in the politics, and obviously the economics thereafter. So that on its own causes conflicts, it causes tensions, it causes political instability, which may result, obviously, in many cases, as we have seen in our continent, in economic instability as well. So when we don't have those three pillars that ought to be there to strengthen a strong democratic state functioning well, for example, if there's an interference in the judiciary system, you find that when there's corruption, for example, it doesn't get dealt with as it ought to be, because your political members on each side actually have a direct influence on even your parliamentary systems and your judiciary as well. That is supposed to be the last leg of defense the people of that country. So when those are not strengthened, or they are shaken, or they are not balanced, if I can put it in that way, there's going to be a direct instability politically, and it will then result in those tensions that you see between the people and their respective governments. So in Africa, we find that over a very long period of time, though we have achieved our independence as respective states, but we post those independence, where we were supposed to then look at how best do we then take our countries forward on behalf of our people in terms of our economies, strengthening our democracies, etc. But you find that we've almost gone backwards, and we're actually probably worse off now than we were when we were still oppressed, which is quite sad. I always say as African children, we're actually experiencing a second level of oppression, and now where we are being now oppressed by our very own liberators. I know it's quite a strong statement to say, but it's the reality of what we find. It's where we find ourselves. So I do believe that for us, even with regards to the leadership of the African Union itself, where there is no communication, integration, and there's a gap between the leadership of the African Union, both in the union itself and the commission, and the gap between them and the people of the continent, where the people have their cries for democratic states to be run, for dealing with corruption that's crippling governance, it's crippling states, it's crippling economics, where economies are being mismanaged, where there's autocratic rule, where people are in the government for themselves, for their own benefits, for their own financial gain, for their own popularity, etc., and no longer for the people. So when that happens, it causes a direct tension then between the people that are supposed to be led by the respective leadership. And therefore, when there is that gap, automatically people will feel the frustration and the need to, when they're not heard or when there's no intervention as such, they will feel the need to then take up arms themselves, to liberate themselves from the situation that they're actually in, which is actually basically what happened. If you look at our history of how we won our independence, we didn't have a choice. Our rulers were not going to listen to us, to listen to to our cries in terms of the oppression we experienced, and therefore we had no choice but to take up arms and fight. Fight the oppressor, fight the colonialism, fight the imperialism, fight apartheid in our country. So, I foresee a situation where now, we're almost going backwards in terms of the same situation where now we are being liberated, we are independent, we are free, but we are our respective states still don't have those three pillars in place, and therefore, because of that, that tension remains there. And people are crying that the economies have collapsed, there's mismanagement, there's corruption, there's all those issues are not being dealt with. And yet leadership doesn't seem to be hearing those cries and intervening where they should. Coming back to the issue of the African Union itself, as well as the leadership of the Commission and the Union itself, I do believe at some point in time there has to be some form of an independent oversight. Because currently what is happening now is, and I'll mention the issue of Zimbabwe, it's not a nice issue, but it's important that you deal with it, where you find that we have these tensions in a country, or problems in a country, but none of the leaders are able to actually effectively deal with them because of the issue of sovereignty, as well as the issue of bilateral relations, etc. So because of those issues, you find that now you have leaders that are sitting in a formation that is legal, but they actually cannot call each other out. There's nothing they can do. If one country oversteps the mark, the other one can't say. It's like two brothers in a house where the one starts to abuse the children, and the one, no one can call each other out, because the one thinks, I'm also older, but you're also older, but there's no father figure or father board to say, what, you need to have some form of control over yourselves and be able to do A, B, C, D, F, G. Right now you have everybody is actually running their own country respectively, and and have that own sovereignty, but they can't call each other out. And that is exactly the challenge we have in the continent, that we have a union that's there, but it's when it comes to it being effective in dealing with the issues that affect the citizens directly, it's not perhaps that role. There is that gap, and therefore I do believe at some point in time it's either we have independent bodies that are sitting there and not the direct presidents of the countries, but independent people that are going to play the oversight role as a recommendation, or if not, then the next part would probably be to look at saying, what, we need to have an elder body and father body to play the oversight, because as it is now, the structure is there, but it's not actually, it's not actually doing what it ought to do, and so those tensions remain there, and people are then forced to leave their countries in seek of refuge in other states, purely because they have nothing else to do. Where else can they go? What else can they do? Because there is no effective what do you call it? There is no effective oversight in over one state over the other. So that's the challenge that we're facing, and therefore I was saying in my meeting recently, sometime in September, with the African Union via the ECOSEC, that the way we are looking at this thing, in my understanding, is we're looking at it from a bottom-up approach as opposed to a top-bottom approach. So we're saying the civilians themselves are taking up arms for whatever reason, which is something that's obviously cannot be tolerated or celebrated. But I always say, look at the root cause of the situation, than deal with the deal it at a hypothetical level. Look at what is contributing to the situation and deal with the root cause. And by dealing with that root cause, you then you then unbundle the situation, or whatever the case may be. So I was saying, we have a situation where we are having all these states, with different challenges, some worse than the others. There's a lot of corruption that's becoming endemic in all this, in most of our states. We are finding a situation where we're entering sovereign debts. I know in our country we're not there yet, but I would almost say we are almost there, because the amount of money that we owe to the IMF is actually quite shocking. And that's purely mainly because of the mismanagement of the economy for a long period of time. And that situation that we find ourselves in as a country is not unique to ourselves. We find that similar or worse situations are happening in other African states. And
Yes.
so, for as long as the leadership in the AU does not look internally and say, you know what is contributing to our people having to take up arms? How are we failing our citizenry? How are we failing our civilians? And that causes them to actually end up rebelling against our respective states. I'm not advocating for leadership change as such, or for a coup d'etat as it happened in Mali. I'm not saying that should be the case. I still believe in democracy and dialogue and democratic way of solving things legally, etc. But however, I was always saying, they need to start to reflect and say, how are we contributing to the problem? Before they say the civilians are in the wrong, the civilians are doing the wrong thing, how are they on their side possibly contributing to the problem that they find themselves in? And at the hard core of that is exactly what I said. When those three pillars are not there, you are bound to actually experience the situation that you're experiencing. And then it just becomes a vicious cycle. The one leader leaves office, and now another one gets in. For as long as the situation is not dealt with strategically by the AU, like what I mentioned about the oversight issue, it's just going to continue to perpetually, continue and continue and continue. So yeah, I think to answer your first question, I think that's the best approach that I think should happen. I think at some point in time we would need to have some form of a referendum as well, from answering your economics part of the question, because I was saying to colleagues of mine in the African 55 states that Africa has been basically has not had a break. We've had over 400 years of colonialism and imperialism, where our minerals were stolen and are still being stolen until today. Post-independence, we still find that in the midst of wealth, we are still in poverty. So there's definitely, we haven't dealt with the situation at all. Most countries are now sitting at close to 100 years now, 60 years and above, and my some 50 hours, close to coming to 30, with now 26 years. I'm
gonna come to that part of Africa's raw materials still being taken out, because I just want to take a little read from some of the contributions we have. Mohammed Fadel from Sudan. Ndlovu Hadison says, we need to clean the African Union because it is so dirty and ineffective. And I have Lord Stanley Sr. watching from Kenya. And George Jumbo says, Nkosazana, your response to this complex question is spot on. Our biggest undoing is in Africa is that we do not govern and operate within our constitution. Now, I'm looking for Dr. Sinkala. I can't seem to, I'm not able to recognize him. I'm not sure if he's trying to join. What name he's on, I'm not sure. But I'm just going to quickly, until I'm able to figure out who the person here is, if it's Dr. Sinkala, I'm going to quickly go to talking about, yes, we cannot in our, different countries, make sure that Pan-Africanists are the ones that become heads of state or presidents. But we should be able to have that power when it comes to who leads the African Union, whether it is the African Union or the African Union Commission, because I think it is a crime to have people who are not Pan-Africanists heading those positions, because that's the reason we are faced with this ridiculous situation where Dr. Faki wants to come unopposed, even though he's ineffective in that position. He's been so ineffective as a leader in that position. And it's not rocket science to know that he's being influenced by some Western powers, i.e. France, because there have been evidence to show that the reason why France would want their stooge to be there. Now, how are we going to get ourselves to a place where, yes, you talked about having independent oversight, having an elder father body governing, but all this will still come back to the same issues if we do not fix the challenge of having people who are not Afrocentric, who are not Pan-Africanist, taking over those positions.
I definitely agree with you, Susan. I think it's actually quite a critical point. If you don't have Afrocentrism or being a Pan-Africanist at heart, to begin with. There's no way you can drive an agenda for a free Africa, economically, politically, and in every other way. So most certainly, that becomes the starting point and the ingredient that qualifies anybody to actually become part of that formation. I'm not exactly sure of the history of how it happened that somebody who's not possibly a Pan-Africanist got into that position. I do know that most of our African leaders do get influenced by Western powers, and I think by design. If you look at the history of the continent, when they do enter those positions, they find that they're not economically free, and are already bound by the Western powers because of the strength of the Western powers in our respective economies. And I believe that for as long as we have not removed that hold, maybe in our generation or the next one to come, for as long as we have not removed that hold of the Western powers in our economies, for any leader who comes in to lead, will always be tempted to sell out the African dream, to compromise one way or the other at the expense of the African children. And so my take on that is that for us to go forward, we need to start to take back control and ownership of our economies. Though it's going to be in a very difficult environment, looking at the fact that we are currently we are owing. That's why I totally detest the issue of the debt. When we self-sabotage by actually, stealing from our own economies through corruption, etc., that is unabated and that doesn't get dealt with. We find ourselves becoming desperate and having no choice but to go back to our colonial masters and to borrow those monies for us to survive again. So it becomes an extreme vicious cycle that continues and continues and continues, unabated. So my understanding is that at some point in time or the other, we need to go back and to the drawing board and say, you know what, we have the skills, we have the land, we have the minerals, we have the capacity within the continent. How best can we come together with the help of even our counterparts or in the diaspora to say how best can we come together and borrow from each other, and not borrow as such, but come together as a united African people, to actually have resources that we can share amongst ourselves in terms of financially, in terms of skill, capacity, in terms of knowledge base, etc. And we do have minerals, we do have land, it's there in the continent, but how can we leverage on that with the skills and the capacity to actually rebuild ourselves without necessarily having to depend on China or any of those partners? Yes, we know we can take from them by allowing them to come and assist us to develop, but the unfortunate part is that it doesn't become a win-win relationship. It becomes parasitic, if I may put it that way, where you are getting, but you stand to lose more. But they're not to get. So for as long as we don't have leadership that allows that to happen, where we actually forge our own path of actually bringing our own economy to be stimulated by ourselves, and to start to even in terms of importing, we find we are importing raw materials and not finished products. That alone is a problem. And I'm just using one example economically. So for as long as we don't have a way of taking back ownership and control of our own respective economies in Africa, we'll find that every leader who comes in gets entrapped in the system where you have no choice. You are actually managing an economy that you don't own because you owe money. So when you owe money, you are totally controlled and ruled. And so I believe that we need to, at some stage, cut off from the umbilical cord of being owned by the West. And the only people that can do that is nobody else but ourselves. And, we need to come up with maybe a strategy for maybe in the next 50 years, just to be, maybe I'm not being ambitious, maybe, yeah.
Because you mentioned this, I have to say, like, one of the ways I feel like we can truly free ourselves is by buying into the dream of Dr. Arikana Shayombro Ikwayo. She's got this initiative, the ADDI, and the idea is to galvanize diasporans, because diasporans are so important when it comes to resources that is sent back home from the different countries that they live in. And it's so easy to raise these monies if our mindsets can change. Do you know, I was having a discussion with one of my Nigerian brothers, and he said, if each Nigerian can donate 100 naira, 100 naira is far less than 50 cents American dollars, If each of us can donate that, do you know how much billions we can raise in the shortest space of time? And
Very true.
if we come together on the platform of the ADDI and as African diasporans and decide to do these things, we can put monies together and take over these projects and jobs that they give to the Chinese because they can't fund these projects. What is so
Very
hard?
true.
What is so hard in the mathematics to understand that until we come together as Africans, we unite as Africans because we're so good at sabotaging ourselves until this kind of mindset changes that we're not going anywhere. Because truly, we're at the point where we have to take the bull by the horn. We can't wait for the governments of these countries to, do everything. I'm just going to take a quick read and acknowledge some of our viewers. Rothschild, I don't know who that is, watching from paradise, he says. And Gloria Orisha, I see you. And of course, Ndoku Hadisin says, most Africans don't rule. Well, I can't really understand what he was trying to say there. I have someone here. I'm thinking if that's Dr. Sinkala. Is that you, Dr. Sinkala? I'm not sure why I'm not able to have him over here. Anyway, you see, when we talked about Rothschild says, first of all, we should change the name Africa and return back to our original name, which is Ethiopia. That's one way to go. When we do change, yes, that's a good point. But I understand. I mean, there's nothing wrong in the name Africa, as far as I'm concerned. If changing names alone would have made a difference, a lot of things would have changed by now. With us trying to keep changing names, and we talked about. For instance, I felt really embarrassed. Just the other day, I watched a video, a documentary by some media house in India, some Indian broadcaster. And when she gave her analysis, when she ended by saying, and in all of this, there is nothing in it for Africa. I felt so disrespected. I felt so angered because we as Africans, why are we sitting down and feeling as though the world should pity us? And we keep, like everyone else is. There's no one who is going to come to our rescue who doesn't want something for themselves in it.
That's very true. That's very true.
We should feel insulted when people come and say they want to rescue us, when they come up with all these things. How do we begin to change the narrative for Africans by themselves to begin to see themselves as that much important and sophisticated?
Okay, I would say, to answer that question, Susan, I would say that it begins with a mentality. Okay, this is Dr. Sinkala. Can I just please take this quickly? He's on the phone.
Yeah.
Hi, Dr. Sinkala.
I'm going to just have a quick read of. Let me recognize some people here, and African Mystery says. Silencing the guns. This is the same as the disarmament forced on Germany after the World War I. This is just a Western ploy to make the whole of Africa vulnerable. No, I don't think you understand what silencing the guns mean. It means that we don't want any more wars on the African continent. And because when there is no peace, there can't be development, there can't be prosperity. So we have to have peace. When we find ourselves in a place where we don't fight wars amongst ourselves anymore. That's what silencing the guns is about. Yes, Fadil Mohammed, you're watching from Sudan, welcome. And Benten Bella says, what's this? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and just quickly say, for instance, one of the things that bothers me is the fact that as a Nigerian who lives in London, seeing and hearing what goes on back home, I am worried. I am seriously worried how we can truly silence the gun beyond 2020 for real. With if people are crying and crying foul and no one seems to be listening to them or doing anything about it, with the killings, so much insecurity. How are we going to silence the guns? If the AU was as effective as it should be, the AU should be able to step up. The AU should be able to step up and take charge of some of the challenges that the other countries on the African continent are facing. Just before I brought you back in Nkosazana, what I was saying is, how are we going to be able to silence the guns beyond 2020? Because in my home country of Nigeria, there has been a lot that is going on that shouldn't happen. The government, I'm not sure if they're willing, or if it's because they are unable, or there is so much injustice. There's so much going on that in my lifetime, I have never been worried about Nigeria going into war or some kind of unrest. But every day when we read things on social media, it's beginning to worry me. It's beginning to worry me if we're going to be back at the place where what our parents faced. It's not a good place. We don't want to experience that. But how can we silence these guns without equity and justice, fairness?
Very good question, Susan. What I was saying earlier on is that in my understanding, I was saying to somebody, a colleague of mine, that we always think you need to first fix the politics and then to look after economics. To a certain extent, I agree, but I believe at the stage we're at, we've had the politics. They are there. They've played their role to a certain extent. They are becoming polluted right now. They're becoming highly toxic, unfortunately. But I understand, my understanding, that right now you need to fix the economics, and the economics will take care of the socio-economic impact, including the political tensions, etc., that are there. So my understanding is that, like what we were mentioning earlier on about what Dr. Arikana was actually suggesting, is once we come together as a united Africa with our brothers and sisters in the diaspora, and begin to forge a way for us to build our continent ourselves economically. I do believe that once you sort out the poverty and you sort out the economic instability and you sort out all the problems financially, in my understanding, that problem will take care of it. Would automatically take care of all the ills we are faced with. But the unfortunate part is that the people that are leading the continent now, the unfortunate part is that we find people that are there that are more self-absorbed. It's more dirty politics that you're experiencing right now, and it's becoming more and more toxic as time goes on because of the scramble for resources. There's the more you take from your country or from your economy, the less the resources are there, and therefore the less the resources are there, the more scramble for resources, and there's more tensions politically, etc. So the situation we're finding right now is that because of the toxic politics that we're finding ourselves in, they have a direct, impact on the economy. Because when you mismanage, countries politically, etc., and there's still those intentions and fights, because everybody wants to lead, everybody wants to be in charge for the sake of being in the cookie jar. So if you want to be in charge, to be able to also access your turn in the cookie jar, which is a cycle that that's happening politically in our respective countries. When the cycle continues to get perpetuated, what happens then is people stop caring about the people and the welfare of the civilians, the country, the economics, and etc. They worry more about amassing wealth for themselves for that short time that they're in office. And so for as long as we haven't dealt with that, it becomes a direct bearing on the economics. And so my understanding is that if we wait for politicians to fix it, it will never get fixed. At some point, what I'm kind of saying, we as a people must actually robustly take back control of our economies through what the suggestions that we were mentioning on earlier, where we make financial resources available within ourselves. The skills are there, the capacity is there, and then you start to build slowly, and then you unlock the economic potential of each and every single state. So once you begin to do that, and you take care of the economics, I believe slowly you then become to amass the power that you need. The power base must still rest with the people. So as a people, sometimes we get frustrated with the politicians, but however, we forget that actually it is us who actually have the power. Like they always say, amandla wethu, the power remains with us. So for as long as we still have that mentality that, for us to be removed from Egypt to Canaan, if I can use that in principle, we will always be stuck in a situation for as long as the politicians don't fix it for us. For how long has they been doing it? For how long has it not been fixed? So the only way we can actually take back the control is to fix the economics ourselves through taking back the control of our economies and etc. But unfortunately, the main thing that worries me is all these deals that we sign with all these countries, including China. I mean, China has been in Africa for a while now, and there's a lot of deals that have been signed by all these respective states with China. And God knows what's there. God knows what's in those deals. And I suspect that one way or the other, we find that we've actually shortchanged ourselves by selling out our very own minerals, for us to benefit from the financial resources we get from all these countries. So we need to cut that cycle. We need to cut that curse, on ourselves as individual states. And we are the ones as the people that can do that. For as long as we have that entitlement mentality that, we'll get help from the West or by China or by whoever, and we look externally than looking internally as us Africans, so we'll always be in that perpetual state of dependency. And so we need to cut off that dependency. And I believe when we do that, we'll begin to see an economically thriving Africa. And once we become economically thriving, I think it will actually automatically take care of all these political tensions, etc. I do believe at some point that, at some stage, we need to start to see a situation whereby we have independent candidates, like what you see in America, running for election. So I think our electoral systems themselves at some point have to change. I know in our country, South Africa, we've actually been quite fortunate that in the last couple of months in this year, we actually won a court case with the Constitutional Court that allows independent candidates elected directly by the people to actually run for political office. And I think since we have started that in our country, and I don't see anything wrong with all other Africans advocating for that, was I think sometimes you are subjected to whoever these political parties bring in to be a leader in power. And so whether they're coming from a toxic political party that itself is not worthy, or is not cleansed, or is not credible, or it doesn't have integrity, we are stuck with the leaders that they actually bring to us. So I think when we actually even begin to advocate for a change in our political system itself, we start to slowly begin to see the change that we'll begin to drive the change that we actually want to see.
Right. I'm just going to quickly take another read. Rothschild again. He is insisting, and I'm quite happy that he did so, because I totally forgot that I've read about it somewhere before. He said Scipio Africanus is the one who gave us the name Africa. So it has some kind of psychological problem to us. Our original name was Ethiopia, and the present country called Ethiopia was called Abyssinia. That is so true. It is true. When you're named by someone, the person becomes like a master. It is absolutely true. So maybe it's a good place to start from. First, change the name of Africa back to its original name, and then we begin to tell our children why the name was changed, and that will be a beginning, a good startup place to begin to change mindsets, don't you think? And so, I want to quickly. There are two people here. I'm not sure who Dr. Sinkala is, but I don't believe.
He's running a little bit late, Susan. I think he was under the impression that the presentation started at 8 o'clock, but he's on his way home. He said to me, I must give him another 5 minutes or so. So any minute now, I expect him to log on, and I think we should pick him up on your side. But he's going to join us shortly.
Right. So again, when you talked about you mentioned, what was it? You mentioned about us taking charge. How are we going to take charge as ordinary people? How do we take charge?
Okay, I would say that in every space that you occupy, you have some form of influence where you are. In your space that you occupy, by virtue of you having this presentation right now that's being broadcast, throughout the entire world, basically, media, the whole world sees. You are going to drive the change you want to see, because we're having these dialogues and these necessary conversations that ordinarily they feel uncomfortable, but yet they're necessary. So you take charge, not necessarily only politically as such, but wherever you are, you become a change agent. In my own country, I'm starting to become a change agent through the work I'm doing through Africa 55 states and other interventions, where we are building skills, I do a lot of skills in education work, young children, educating them on robotics, on educating them on 4IR and all these critical, educational programs that are going to drive our economies and, for us to compete with all these Western powers and all these Asian countries like China, etc. So, you begin to, you influence wherever you are and you drive change in that space. We always think that change must come from a political perspective and coming down. But I honestly believe that wherever you are, wherever you can make a contribution, whether it's through finance, like what Dr. Arikana is doing, or
Yes.
through education, or through advocating for human rights. I mean, right now we're also working on the gender-based violence issue, human trafficking and drugs. We're trying to work with different countries to work on, finding solutions to mitigate against that risk, including security like ISIS, etc. So we know that each and every single person has a role to play, whether in your own workspace, whether as a civilian, as a humanitarian person like myself, as a lawyer, like Dr. Sinkala, as a human rights lawyer as well. So you begin to take charge by advocating for change in that space that you occupy. The bigger picture, obviously, is ultimately we want Africa to be free economically, like I was saying earlier on, because I believe once we are free politically, because we have achieved independence at various times or the other in our history as different states. But we are not economically free, and that's what causes all these social issues and tensions, etc. Because you're not yet economically free. So ultimately, the goal is for us to get there. But to get there, you need education. Together, you need stable economies through a strong civil rights and human rights culture, like I was saying earlier on, where you have these three pillars I mentioned earlier on that need to be present and prevalent in each and every single state. So wherever area you are, that you can actually have some form of influence. You advocate for that. You are a journalist, space, and this alone is another way of driving the change. And I think ultimately, I was saying earlier on to our colleagues that we need to have our own Pan-Africanist,
Yeah.
Pan-Africanist parliament for the youth, because the youth is the future, and we need to invest in that, and to teach them, to take back ownership of the politics in a clean way, and to drive the change they want to see by which will basically become policy in all these countries, and
Yeah.
ultimately even drive the constitutional changes that you want to see, and the legislation changes you want to see in all our countries. So you you take charge by
Yes.
driving change in whatever space you occupy. So we always think it has to happen from a top level, from some political formation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We take charge in every space that we find ourselves. Whatever capacity that you can, you do your bit, and I do my bit, and that's how it's going to happen. I can see Dr. Sinkala is here. Let me quickly add him to the stream. Okay, I think he's still getting himself ready. One of the things I wanted to ask all the time, because you're a lawyer, you know, when we're children, when two kids fight and they have issues, they run to daddy and they run to mommy or they run to the elders, and to bring some kind of resolution, to make peace. When we have issues on the African continent to deal with, because we have an AU that is ineffective, the AU is not able to step in and handle these issues and bring countries together and solve problems. Now we find African leaders taken to The Hague. The Hague was put together for whatever reason, but I have never seen any Western leader, any leader from the Western world, i.e., America, Europe, Britain, anywhere, who have done anything that has been taken to The Hague. So we have come to the conclusion that The Hague was just set up to flog African leaders or whoever from Africa. When do we get to that point where we stop insulting ourselves, disrespecting ourselves, that we're not able to handle our situations? What kind of body do we need to form if the AU is not enough to take care of these issues that might raise their heads in the different countries, so as not to keep belittling ourselves by taking ourselves to The Hague?
Very interesting question. To answer that, I would say, like I was saying earlier on, that power lies. I said that Sinkala has actually joined us. Is there?
I can't
Um,
speak. Go ahead.
Can you pick?
When I see him, I'll bring him back.
Okay. Um, I would say to answer that question, Susan, like going back to what I was saying earlier on about the power being with us as the people. Power
Yes.
does lie with us as the people. And central to that is unity in Africa. It's not a topic that everybody enjoys to listen to,
Mm,
because we have different problems, and some of the problems that we have, are infiltrating into each other. For example, the issue of people jumping borders, coming to another country, creating crimes, creating
mm,
gender-based violence, creating all this sort of ills that causes tensions, and all these xenophobic issues that are there in our different countries. But I would say we can't run away from the agenda of African unity, which
mm,
is in fact the foundation of the organization of African Union, which is now the AU, was
mm,
premised on that. And I think what makes us vulnerable is like what Orkana always says. We have all these different states. They're many, but they are small and they are powerless on their own. And so
mm.
some of them, it's easy to bully them, to bully them over, and then they get manipulated and abused, politically, economically, etc. Of
Mm,
course, if they allow themselves to. But I think to answer your question properly, we need to form a very strong African Pan-Africanist strength of the people of the continent itself. I
yeah.
think without that strong voice continentally, we'll always maybe be defeated as a small collection of people in every country. The reason why I'm saying that is because maybe in my country we're quite a bit fortunate because maybe we have a stronger constitutional state out there all the challenges, but
Yeah.
there's a very strong voice of people who are actually able to speak openly and speak against the ills, the
Mm,
corruption, etc. And I think you
mm,
find that in some states the people still have that fear because there's that element of autocracy in some of the states. So they feel a bit vulnerable on their own, and if they start to speak against the government, they may be attacked or jailed. Even we've seen it in another
yeah.
country I won't mention where a journalist was actually jailed,
Yes.
and there's still that fight. So I think to strengthen that voice of the people, we do need to have a very strong Pan-Africanist voice, driven by the people,
Mm,
and that is able to be to be able to be a voice of reason for each other, to protect each other and also to call each other out as a people. And then
mm,
that voice is a voice that the AU should actually be listening to, because remember, they are in control or in charge. Any leader is in charge because of the people they're elected by the
yeah.
people.
Mm,
So when you have a strong Africanist organization in all the states, it becomes a strong hedge of protection for the
mm,
people, and the AU then knows that they are accountable to the people, in all the different states. So we need to increase that. You need to have amassed that weight of a very strong Pan-African voice, driven
mm,
by African people themselves, independent of obviously from the different states, yet
mm,
stronger and united with one voice that is able to actually even call the AU out, because at the end
yeah.
of the day, the AU itself is
Yeah.
accountable to us as the people. So I believe that is maybe one way of looking at it, and I'm not sure Dr. Sinkala probably want to add uh,
Yeah,
add more
I
ground
have
to that.
just seen Dr. Sinkala come on and disappear again. Let me try. Dr. Sinkala, if you can hear me, please. Umoru, Manuel Umoru, I see you. Yes. Dr. Sinkala, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening
Right.
to
And
your viewers.
yes, so we have been waiting for you. Just before you came on, we were talking, and let me ask you though, how do we make sure that we get the African Union to the point where it is not easily politically manipulated, the African Union Commission and the chairmanship of the African Union? Because we are right now at a point where there is so much going on. The staff at the AU secretariat is not happy with the leadership, yet we have the South African president, who is a current AU chairman, you know, um, frolicking with Mr. Faki, Musa Faki. How do we get, what can we do as ordinary people to make sure that we take their grip, these politicians who don't mean well for Africa, we take the grip they have over this AU and just take charge of it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Susan, for having me. And I think what we need to educate ourselves as Africans is what is the purpose of AU and what mandate do they have. And I think we've been expecting so much from the regional organization and as well as the continental organization which is the umbrella, the African Union.
Mm.
If I take you very briefly backwards, the value and the reason why AU was formulated as Organization of African Unity was to make sure that it helps in the development of the African continent. If you look at elsewhere in the European Union, there where you are, the countries are well established because of that driving force, which was coming from the EU. And now the EU has lost its shine and sheen. That's why you find Brexit and many others have been trying to pull out because
Mm.
the system has been done already. But when you come here in Africa, it is something that is unprecedented because in 1994, um, the founding fathers of what they signed in 1963 in Addis Ababa, where they wanted to create this watchdog. That's why you hear many of the people have actually said it's a toothless bulldog. Yes,
Mm.
it is not a dog, but at one stage it was supposed to be a watchdog that will watch all the 54 states of Africa to make sure that the governance system, the education system, the agriculture system, and many other systems of the dynamics of society has been adhered to, and they've got one agenda. If it is the agenda here in South Africa and in Senegal or Mogadishu or East Africa or wherever the place, must be the same language that Africa has to unite itself
Mm.
because of the type of the caliber of the leaders that we had at that stage. But the idea there was not for the heads of states and governments to be part of the AU,
Mm.
because I believe, and it was correct to say that you cannot be a referee and a player at the same time. They
Mm.
needed an independent individual to be presiding over the AU. But what has come out of the AU and in the year 2000 and 1994, they have changed now the ideology of how it was founded on to be a watchdog, to be a big brother for the rest of the African continents. Because
Mm.
now the African leaders started to agitate and enjoying the independence of the power, so they do not want to be kept in checks and balances on that level
Mm.
because they believe that they're a sovereign state and no other organization should come into the interference of their governance.
Mm.
Hence, you see that AU now has been influenced to take up a stage of like the EU now, which is the administration. So AU region organizations like SADC and the ECOWAS and many others, Central and the Maghreb on the north of Africa, they are only doing administration. They can formulate policies and send them to the member states, and it's up to them to implement them or not. So there's no that type of forcefully watchdog profile which it was established. That's why we see now that AU cannot intervene, and not only that, AU they've got a committee of assembly of heads of states and government. These people they sit only once in a year. They've got a Pan-African Parliament now, which makes a debate of all those who are in government, and also where it is in Africa, here in Midrand in South Africa, they sit once a year. So it is quite difficult to intervene and function on the basis of how it was formed. But
Mm.
what are we saying as people, who wants and demand so much from the AU that it does what we need to do? So this is what I'm trying to explain, that we mustn't force the AU to do what it cannot do.
Mm.
AU and the SADC region organizations have no mandate to intervene and interfere in the domestic affairs of each and every country. So once we understand the dynamics of how well the AU participates in the African continent, then as people now we do not gonna milk a dead cow, that we get the milk and the beef from the dead cow. We're supposed to see how we can leverage within the AU structures and try to implement, because AU and the region organizations get a very good system which they have established. If you hear the former president of Zimbabwe, R.G. Mugabe, he signed the Agenda 2063, but
Mm.
that Agenda 2063 has never been implemented. And none of the African states were implementing that because they know the Agenda 2063 is a threat for their governance, because some of them
Mm.
they will be removed from government, because part of the reforms in terms of electoral processes is as a result of doing that.
Yeah.
And hence, as I conclude on this point, I can safely say to the people that that's why I sat down with the people of Africa, say, how can we do now for the fact of understanding the dynamics and the challenges of the African Union, can we create an umbrella which represents people? Because you must remember, AU represents only the governments, and who is the government? There's no individual called the government. So
Yes.
the AU represents only the heads of states and government, and only those who are in government. What about the people who are outside the government? What about the people in diaspora? Hence, we formed Africa 55 states, which works in line with the Organization of African Union, which is called now African Union, that we take up this mandate. As our mandate is from the people, it's not from the government. So we do
Right.
not have barriers. We are able to command the people. We are able to decolonize the people and tell them that forget about looking at AU, because AU really is not going to give you what you want. But how can we work with the AU structures to make sure that we implement what we want by looking
Right.
at after the people?
So how successful have you been with the Africa 55 states? How influential have you used that platform to to the advantage of the African people, especially in a time like this where we want the football pitch to be open to anyone who wants to run for the chairmanship of the African Union Commission?
Yes, we've written letters to the African Union. The chairperson, President Cyril Ramaphosa, has received our letter, which we have written that the appointment of the chairmanship has to be rotational. And everybody must participate. Not only that we work in parallel with the AU, but we also trying to influence that the AU becomes the agenda of what it was conceived in 1957 in Accra, Ghana, and which was endorsed by His Emperor Haile Selassie in Addis Ababa, where 32 heads of state they signed an agreement that the AU will be the big brother as a watchdog to make sure that it creates an army that will protect the peace and security of the continent, and as well as it will influence it to make sure that if a government does not perform, like what we have a delinquent government in Zimbabwe, they're supposed to come and sit down with President Emerson Mnangagwa that if you have failed to run this government, can we put this country under administration so that we assist to put the Zimbabweans to be on the course? So the reforms has to be part of the people who are supposed to be deposited in the AU industry, the organization. So we are trying to make sure that these policies, they go back and they refrain from the administration function like the EU, because Africa is not developed. Africa, we do not have systems. Africa, we are exporting individuals and educated people elsewhere to America and the United Kingdom, where you are there, and living with only idiots as citizens, whom I call, who cannot even do something. So how can we protect the citizens and as well as the minerals of the African continent, that these, they do not go to America to develop America, but we keep our human resources, the doctors, the engineers to. So that's where the role the African 55 states is doing. We also have got an extension of the training of political parties to understand that the governance of a country is based on the dynamics of a political system. So how can we have young people to participate in politics? How do we have good young people, well-meaning, to participate in politics to make sure that we take control of this generational responsibility that we have?
Right. And hopefully Africa 55 states is going to be physically present in all African countries at the moment. I want to, because we had gone quite a bit before you came, I want to quickly ask again, how do we silence the guns in the year 2020 and beyond if there is no equity and justice? Citing my country, Nigeria, as an example, where there is so much going on, where some people feel like the government want to do something, but their hands are tied. Others feel like the government of the day is not willing to do anything. And so there's a lot of killing going on in Nigeria right now, and the people are not happy. So how do we see that it is possible to truly silence the gun if a country as huge as Nigeria is almost like, you could call it, a ticking time bomb?
Yeah, Susan, what is silencing of the guns? If you may define that term, I really do not understand it. So, if you can briefly explain to me what is silencing of the guns.
Silencing of the guns, in my understanding, is so that every African country do not go into war anymore. That we have peace on the continent, because without peace, there won't be any sort of development and progress, prosperity coming to the continent. So that's my understanding of silencing the guns by the year 2020.
Correct. 2020 is almost finished. But
Mm,
let me put my perspective, Susan, in the way that we understand. This silencing of the guns has just been an agenda of the New World Order. It's not something that people must buy in. How can a country like Nigeria put the guns down when we have the Biafras and those rebels who are trying to kidnap the kids and the war is still on? How can you put down the guns when the war is still on? That I do not really understand, because the arms now, they become the part of the security and defense of our continent. We're never going to silence the guns. That is a lie, and the Africans should not believe that, because the
wow.
arms, they protect our integrity and our security of our places. Imagine you are a president of Nigeria and they tell your bodyguards to put down the guns. Will you feel safe in your country or as a president? You're never going to feel safe. So that is a lie that we people of Africa should not even campaign to buy it. Silencing of the guns will never going to happen. The guns and the arms, that's why we've got departments of the protection services. We've got
Mm,
the CIDs and all that arms of the government. It involves the security of the country. That's why we've got the Department of Defense and Security. It protects us. That's why we've got the armies, we've got the police, we've got everything. That puts the people and the foreign invaders to behave. Without the guns in the world will just be free. That's why we are saying that we cannot leave the guns in the arms of the bad people. So the real issue in Africa is to go to the social and economical problems and the challenges. Why are we having these problems and where are they coming from? The problems in Nigeria is not different from South Africa or Zambia, my country, or Botswana or any other country. The problem is we've got so many people chasing a slice of bread, and the competition for survival has reduced. So what is the white monopoly capital people doing? Those who are controlling the earth, the Bill Gates Foundation and the Soros and all those the who meant people to try to protect our countries on the continent, they are taking our own people to give them money so that they start creating destabilization within our countries. Like
mm,
Nigeria, you find that the Muslims and the Christians are fighting. Meanwhile they are enjoying the fruits and the fruits of the oil, which is and the
mm,
resources of Nigeria.
mm,
So as Africans, we must not look at what we have immediately here, because these are just decoys which has been brought to us to be getting confused so that we fight against each other. I
mm,
talk about it again. It is here in South Africa. Now they are saying South Africans are xenophobic. They do not like the other rest of the African continent. They are talking about the Nigerians, that the Nigerians must go up. Besides talking about criminality, but the fact, the real of social cohesion for African people has to
yeah.
start in the united way so that we get united as people. So silencing of the gun in the year 2020 is not going to work, not even in 2035 or 2063, because the war is still there and we need to protect our borders and our boundaries and our resources. That's why we have these things and the guns. But the only thing that will condemn that, why do we have the arms in the wrong people, the wrong hands, the Boko Harams? Why are they armed in Nigeria there? Why are they armed there in the insurgencies now are mushrooming now here and close by in Mozambique, and as well as in Ethiopia and the Sudan and South Sudan? Why we've got 16 countries and civil war fighting each other? If you look at these people are fighting, is not the white people. It's our
Mm,
own people, our own young men and women who have been offered money, $1,000, $1,500, because of our survival. We do not have resources. We are failing to manage. We've got
mm,
dysfunctional governments. So these people, for them to feed their families, they would rather take that $1,000 and to kill their brothers and sisters. So how
right.
can we manage our people based on the demographic and the population density, the number of people in an area? What resources do we have? How can we work and capitalize on this? Those are the areas that we have now to be start talking. And
Right.
yes, Africa, 55 states, we have recruited ambassadors in each and every state, 54 countries. We are getting traction on the ground. And as well, we call ourselves as 55 states. We've added another state is for those who are in diaspora, because we
Mm,
believe that those who are in diaspora hasn't been represented by any state. We see
Absolutely.
these governments and the heads of states going to Geneva or going to London, there where you are. You'd never heard of Buhari to address the people of Nigeria who are in London or England or UK at large, to tell them, you guys who are in diaspora here, what can you do to develop our country? What do
Hmm.
you see from this angle that we can develop your country so that you can come back? So those are the elements and the issues that we are intervening, and we're trying to make sure that we decolonize our mindset as the Africans.
Right. Wow. This was a different angle. I was quite shocked to get to hear the response you gave concerning silencing the guns. But this is why we do what we do here, because it's about educating, informing us, and allowing us to think differently and analyze situations differently. Rothschild says, I have a question for Nkosazana. Has she gone? No, she hasn't gone. Please type in your question. Type in your question, and I'll make sure that she responds. I will read the questions out for her to respond to. Is democracy a viable tool for Africa? Because I watched recently, I've heard different people debate this democracy not working for Africa. And then I heard the general overseer of the Redeemed Christian Church do he had a meet and a chat with some journalists, and he did mention about recognizing the chiefs. He's talking about the Nigeria, in the Nigeria, as far as Nigeria is concerned, not doing away with the chiefs. So that brings me to asking, is democracy really working for Africa? And if it is not working for Africa, is going back to our traditional rulership, or what is going to be the way that the one way of governance that will work for Africa?
Yeah, Susan, you must understand that before democracy was franchised to Africa, we had those traditional leaders who are presiding over our resources.
Mm,
Though there might be communities from 20 to 30, sometimes 100 people, but they were governing and things was going all right.
mm,
We never had problems. When we started looking elsewhere, when the explorers came to Africa, in terms of teaching religion and other aspects, and the exploration of the continent, they came up with these certain issues. But to fast forward, when in the year 1884, 1885, the largest and the longest conference I've ever had in the history of human civilization is the
mm,
Berlin Conference. They call it was a scramble for Africa, but I call it was an auction where Africa was sold. If it was in Nigeria, in West Africa, there was a Niger Delta company which bought of Nigeria. Nigeria was sold for 780,000 pounds at that time. So if you look at the southern part of Africa as well, we had the British South African Company,
mm,
which bought off this from from this businessman. But if you look at the governance at that time, when the British bought off these countries like Nigeria, South Africa, Zambia, and Nyasaland and others,
mm,
they needed somebody to preside over the resources of the entire. But when they asked one tribe, they said, you, the Zulu, we want you to preside over the country. The other ones, they said, no, I'm the chief of the Biafras, or I'm the chief of the Zambia, the Zulus, I'm the chief of whatever. I cannot have Susan to preside over us because we are the Biafra people. So the
mm,
Africans were so divided and they did not want to take a position at that stage. That's why these now colonizers, they depict their governors to preside over these countries. Even in
mm,
Nigeria, they are the OMA, which was called the British Overseas Management Administration, managed by a white person from somewhere else. So they are slowly our traditional leadership, because of denial by the chiefs, to preside over the larger space. Them, they were only confined to their territories, had
yes.
given an opportunity for the white people to make up a systems called democracy. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with the democracy. Democracy is being practiced as well in the United States of America. But the only problem here in Africa is we do not understand this thing called democracy, because when we are trying to do something, we do not have leadership that will lead us where we are going. We have leaderships, who are bought off by other people, and the agenda of trying to govern a country is diluted. And even though it is diluted, now it is democracy. People wants to have their say. That is the confusion. So if a leader, like for instance, myself, I'm trying to run as president in Zambia. So when I tell the people that I want to lead you to this area, they said, also us, we've got to say we want to do this side. How well can you be different to make it goosey, or to make it, what the fufu you like in Nigeria there, or the okra soup, and any others? How different can you have? I was shocked when I went to Zimbabwe, extended by the AU to preside over the elections there. I find 150 political parties. In Democratic Republic of Congo as well, it is not short there. There's more than 200 political parties. In Zambia, my country, there's as well almost 100 political parties. In Nigeria as well, there's a lot of political parties. As I'm speaking now, in Ivory Coast as well, there's got a lot of political parties, and the president wants to go for another third term. It is a confusion and a tragedy of Africa that we have decided for ourselves to start doing this. And if you follow the paper trail of money, you would have found that the ones who are making this confusion to divide us, this is coming from elsewhere, from outside. So what we are saying about the traditional leaders as Africa 55 states, we're going to tap in back, though we will never going to take back to where it was before, but we want to include now the traditional leaders to be part of the governance, because they are spiritually connected to their people, they are spiritually connected to the continent, and they're spiritually connected to the well-being of the people. But we also do not rule out those traditional leaders who sold the people, traditional leaders who are living in luxury lives, like King Mswati in Swaziland, presiding over a poorest country in Africa, while he's enriching himself in Bentleys and those sorts of things. So we need to have an agenda as Africans to find this democracy that can work for us. I don't mind having dictators in Africa, like good dictators like Paul Kagame, who say everybody jump in a bus, we are going this side, and things like that move. Now, what we have with democracy, if we tell people jump in a bus, these people they are saying, I want to go to Nigeria. This one they said, I want to go to Ethiopia. The bus has never moved. Africa has been trying to move this bus for a very long time. Africa has been under construction for a very long time because people are in denial and they do not want change. They do not want to develop. And you find every young man and women who is educated in Africa, they see that I can't fight this thing. They are leaving the continent. Like I said before, and I'm not shy to say it, Africa now we are left with only idiots who are presiding over our dysfunctional governments. That's why our governments are not working. And I'm telling you, Susan, this is very simple. The way you manage your house, making sure that you've got food and you've got shelter and you've got a car, it's the same way you have to govern the country. You must make sure that your people are educated, the education system is feeding into the economy. The young men from 19 years to 35 to 40, they are productively in employment, they are paying taxes. The older people, they are on social grants, they're being assisted. And those who are sick, you make up the hospital infrastructure, the road network has to be cleared. But when you see the African continent, when you go, like I visited Ghana, Nigeria last year, you see Okadas, people throwing stones, uncivilized, no control and things and that. It gladdens my heart very so that we do not have a direction. Our system of action, which was inherited, it is not working. So how can we include people now to start working to make sure that what we are doing is really working for our democracy, for us to enjoy the fruits of Africa?
Right. How can we? How can we end this protracted illness called underdevelopment on the continent of Africa? How can we? Until we get to the point where the people are absolutely involved and educated. Because the reason why the boss wants to go this way and the other person says, I am going this way, I'm going this way, I want to go that way, and makes democracy a failure in Africa, it's because the people are uneducated. The masses of the people are ill-informed. So in order to get ourselves out of this protracted illness called underdevelopment, we need to start by educating, informing the people in languages they understand. And having said that, it will bring me to saying that because Africa doesn't speak a unique, a general language that make us understand ourselves, I think we have a challenge there as well. And because we're also always trying to communicate to our people in English language or in French, and a lot of these people are not educated enough to understand us. So there are people who have ill intentions and they manipulate the situation where they translate what they want to these uneducated people. And so in the long run, you confuse them to give their vote to the wrong person because they are ill-informed, not just because they're able to give them a little dollar for the day to feed their tummy. Nkosazana, I hope you are there. If she's there, there's a question for you, please. If you can hear me, please come back quickly and I will read out the question from Rothschild. Yes. Right. So there's a question for you from Rothschild. He says, Nkosazana, first of all, I'd like to thank you and your country, South Africa, for giving me citizenship, which has honestly helped to upgrade my welfare. I lived at Joburg for 20 something years and left since 2009. My question is, what do you think about Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Susan.
Yeah. So his question is, what do you think about Julius Malema's policy?
Which policy is he specifically referring to?
I wouldn't know that, but he talked about living in South Africa and gotten his citizenship. He's lived in South Africa for 20 something years and left since 2009. So, well, Rothschild, if you can hear, you have to be specific as to what policy you're talking about. Real quickly, we're going to be rounding up with Dr. Sinkala and you now. I want you to just give your final thoughts on how we should, as Africans, begin to galvanize to get ourselves out of this problem of being referred to as the underdeveloped world. Go ahead.
Okay. Must I answer that, Susan?
Yes.
Is it my question?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I think what I was mentioning earlier on regarding the issue of unity is definitely a starting point.
Yeah.
I think for us as Africa to be able to galvanize ourselves, it does talk to not only politically to be united, to speak with one pan-Africanist voice, like I was saying earlier on, but I think also with the African free continental trade that's coming up effectively from next year, I think it will also go a long way in forging trade relations amongst ourselves and the economic stimulation of our respective countries. Like I was saying earlier on, that I think for Africa to be able to have, it's critical for us to understand that we need to hone the skills that we have both here and in the diaspora, financial resources that we can actually generate through trade, and that we can actually like what Dr. Arikana is suggesting, of us putting on a fund that will go towards the development of the worst of our ravaged countries as us as citizens. So it's I always say, for as long as you have land and you have skills and capacity, you have longevity. The nice, great thing, or the wonderful blessing about Africa is that we in the future we are going to have a biggest population of young people, which is the greatest asset for us that we can actually hone in. And I think if we start to invest on the youth now through education and streamlining our education in terms of the skills of the future, and aligning ourselves with to what the rest of the world is doing in terms of 4IR and 5IR, etc. the good thing is we have longevity, we have a vibrant population, we have health, we have vast land, we have a very huge arable land in the whole world. And obviously once you start to generate those resources of knowledge, knowledge sharing, knowledge systems amongst ourselves. And I honestly believe that by leveraging on all that, it gives us enormous potential to actually rebuild the continent, to the potential that it actually has. Obviously, we cannot run away from the fact that we are still economically trapped, and that is a political situation that we as African children need to deal with at some point in time or the other. I was saying earlier on to Africa 5 states that at some point you need to start to review through maybe a continental referendum, even these respective agreements, holy alliances, sorry, that we have actually made with all these countries that where we stand to lose more than we than we gain. And at some point we need to have those uncomfortable conversations, but we need to have them, because if we don't, we'll remain in the situation and keeping on talking and nothing is going to change. So I honestly do believe in all sincerity that we need to leverage on our skills, our finances, trade amongst ourselves as we will be with the start of the Africa 55 Continental Free Trade Agreement that's coming up. And on the support from the diaspora, we're a huge population. We have got about 1.3 billion approximately people in the continent, and with a vibrant young population that we that's going to be there in the future. When we start to invest in the youth through skills and capacity now, it will go a long way for us to unlock the economic potential whilst protecting our resources, that is our mineral resources, etc., and protecting our land as well. So once you start to to unblock those issues politically, I think we do have quite a great future ahead of us.
Right. I don't see Dr. Sinkala here, but I'll take a quick read and then we'll just round up. But Manuel Umoru says, for us as a people and continent to end the present state of underdevelopment, we need to change our system of governance that will usher in well-groomed and selfless leaders, and of course, propel the citizens to be proactive and be responsive to African issues. His opinion. Seth Agwe said he's talking to Dr. Sinkala, but I don't see Dr. Sinkala here anymore. He says, Dr. Charles Sinkala mentioned that the finest of African brains have left the country and we are now left with idiots ruling us. But what does he have to say about those leaders who also had their education outside, in the best schools outside, and yet are being ineffective? I'm sure you can respond to that.
Dr. Sinkala was here to take on that question. Which one is it? Bomelo?
Seth Agwe.
Or about the skills that have left the continent?
Yes. He says, what about the leaders that have gotten their best the education abroad, the best education, and come back and still ineffective?
Sure, that's quite a difficult one to answer. Well, they do receive good education, especially those that have gone to the UK, to the Cambridge education system, etc. But I mean, leadership is not necessarily education. You can have the best of education and not being able and not be a leader. So being highly educated or highly informed, if I may put it that way, doesn't necessarily mean that you have the character to lead. So I think our focus should be within the continent. How do we build up skills internally within the continent ourselves to ensure that we then we begin to bridge the gap between the skills that are required for development and the education systems that are there. That's something that is within our control that we can actually do. And obviously benchmarking with the best education systems in the whole world. And leadership is something that you develop with potential that's there. So it's something that we can do. It's within our control. We can groom leadership, and we can we can build an education of a world-class and quality standard. So I'm not sure if that answers this question, but I think that's the best way to answer. I will not go to Dr. Sinkala's comments; those were his comments. But in terms of answering the question, I think that's the best way forward.
You know what? I just want to say, wow, thank you so much. You know what, Nkosazana, I'm going to ask you to keep coming back, because I know there's so much you can offer us. You can talk to us. You can educate us. And thank you so much. We're way out of the 1 hour we normally broadcast, but because I was really enjoying, we were getting so much out, and I didn't want to end it. But for now, for today, we're going to end the broadcast here today, and I will definitely bring Nkosazana. Can you pronounce your name the way you pronounce it as a South African?
Nkosazana.
Nkosazana. Thank you. Beautiful name. Thank you so much. And I will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much. And I would like to say to our people before we end the broadcast, Susan, there is hope. I know the situation that it is right now.
Yes.
It can make us feel very hopeless, very despondent, and and feel like throwing in the towel. But there is hope. We have the best capacity, we have the best skills, and we have people like myself and Dr. Sinkala and many other who are committed to the African dream. So let allow ourselves to be given space to operate, to work, to do what we are called to do. And I do believe, I always say, the Africa we see now, in the Africa in about 50 to 100 years' time, is going to be totally different, because Africa is still blessed with minerals. It's still blessed with good climate. It's still blessed with people with longevity. It's still blessed with health. So those things alone show that the capacity and the potential is still there. So I just want to say to our people, what, don't be despondent. Don't think of picking up and leaving and going to try your luck overseas. And though I don't discourage it at all, but there is we are working very hard behind the scenes to ensure that we address all these injustices politically and economically, for the purpose of development for our people. So thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm very grateful. Asante sana for that. And thank you for everybody who joined on social media, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, everywhere. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, asante sana. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. That was powerful. Like, I did not even want to end this broadcast. I'm just going to take the other a few read before I finally cut off. But Mana Umoru says, for Africa to advance and change her present situation, we must, particularly in the youth demographic. Youth as the veritable tools to propel and advance the economic, social, and political situations of Africa. And Twinkle Oruwariye says, democracy is not working in Africa. Democracy gives too much freedom. The African man needs to be controlled. Democracy's freedom leads to corruption. So a new governance is what? Governance is needed. A new governance is needed in Africa. The Chinese system should be tried in that. No, Mr. Twinkle Oruwaria, we don't want to try the Chinese system because you're so pro-China. I don't get it. We have our system before democracy came. We can look for ways to take what worked for us as Africans from our traditional ways of, living and governing ourselves, and, pick from here and put here, see what works for every society. Please stop mentioning China in everything you say, Mr. Twinkle Oruwariye. Sorry, I don't mean to come across like that, but you're so always for China that it's beginning to get on my nerves. Sorry. Nkosazana, you are good. We need more women like you on ground, says Bomano Umoru. Absolutely. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us on this program. Mr. Twinkle Oruwariye is my brother, and that's the reason I feel like I have the freedom to speak to him like that in public space. Yes. Thank you so much. And I look forward to having you again. Please remember to like and follow us on Facebook. It is _Susan West. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel. It doesn't take much. Subscribe and press the bell button so that when we do go live, you will be one of the first to know. I mean, this program is waxing stronger and stronger. We need your support. And invite your friends next week. As we're going into the week, I will announce in our usual manner who the next guest is going to be. Thank you so very much. And do your bit for Africa. I am doing my bit, no matter how little it is. It is about informing, educating, and invigorating the passion and spirit that we have for Africa as Africans on the continent and in the diaspora. Until next week, God bless you. I love you all. Bye-bye.